An investigation is underway. Mayoral candidate and president of the city council and a volunteer or former volunteer for another campaign here in Baltimore. So now I want to we're gonna slow walk this. Okay, Brandon Scott was punched in the face by a volunteer for the campaign of Sheila Dixon. So both gentlemen have two separate stories, have two different accounts as to what happened. Now, for her part, let's say this: Sheila Dixon has condemned the volunteer. She wants to say volunteer because she was not paying this person at all, and she said that she has severed all ties with him. And if y'all need to prosecute him, she said do that. She don't want nothing to do with it. So, on Wednesday of this week, there was a candidate forum at the Reginald F. Lewis Museum here in Baltimore downtown. So, Radio on Fire was present at this event. No, I did not punch Brandon Scott in the face. All right, so let me just put that out there. I had witnesses. I was sitting in my chair the whole time. So, here's how they are portraying the story. Brandon Scott said that he walked up to the Reginald F. Lewis Museum for the event, and he was confronted by a Dixon volunteer whose name is Michael T. Moore. He was wearing a red Dixon campaign vest. Okay, so if you've ever been to the Reginald F. Lewis Museum, there's like a walkway in the front, and at events like this, you have volunteers from campaigns outside, passing out literature, passing out flyers. You got signs out front. You have that whole thing, just like when you go to vote. It's just like that. This event was just like that. So there were folks outside, passing out flyers and all that kind of stuff. So here's where the differing accounts begins. Okay. So the representatives for several candidates, as I said, were handing out the literature to people that were arriving or leaving the event. One of those people was someone who worked with the Dixon campaign. Okay. According to Brandon Scott, he said that he prevented me from going in. He pushed me and then he swings at me, said Brandon Scott, speaking of Moore. All right, it's interesting. So he's just passing out flyers, and then he just randomly prevents you from going in. It's interesting. Doesn't sound logical, but that's interesting. So let's say this. Okay, we definitely don't want Brandon Scott to be hurt, which he is not. He said he was not hurt, and he said he filed the complaint with the police department, alleging that he was assaulted. He said that the punch was not hard. He said it was light. He lightly pats my jaw. So like a love tap, you mean? Like anyway, so he says that. That's what he says happened. Okay. So I have witnessed aggressive volunteers, and I'm going to give you Moore's account, and then we're gonna dissect this a little bit. So the guy whose name, as I said, is Michael T. Moore, he says this. He said that he acknowledged that he punched Brandon Scott, but he said that the president of the city council assaulted him first. He said that this was in self-defense. He said that Brandon came out of nowhere, and pushed me in the back, trying to get into the building. And so, yes, I punched him in self-defense after he pushed me from behind. I was standing my ground. That's what he says. Now, I'm going to say this. Full transparency. I don't agree with Brandon Scott's politics. I don't particularly care for Brandon Scott. But I don't want that to get in the way of, it sounds to me like Moore's account is what happened. he probably was passing out flyers to someone else, and Brandon Scott wanted to get past, and maybe he pushed past him, and maybe more overreacted, because it sounds like he overreacted, and maybe he didn't mean to punch him, maybe he just took a swing, and it connected lightly, like Brandon Scott saying. So I think that technically what both of them are saying is the facts, but they're both putting a different spin on it. So Brandon Scott looks at it like him standing there was blocking him from getting in, so that's why he pushed him. And Moore is saying he just pushed him, and maybe he didn't realize that he was blocking Brandon Scott. So, needless to say, no one was injured, no one was hurt. I'm not sure why he filed, because he stated that he wasn't hurt. He stated that it was a light, push, light jab. Why file an assault? Why do it? Right? That's what I want to know. Unless you're trying to get some sympathy from people, but you can't get sympathy and try to act tough. Like, I'm from Park Heights and went to Maryville, what I mean? And then you're filing this police report, and you weren't even injured. Because let's keep in mind, I was at this event. He spoke after this, right? Sheila Dixon spoke. They were they on the stage together? Yeah, they were on stage together. And, Brandon Scott didn't look like anything was wrong with him or anything like that. To me, there was no need to file a police report, But regardless, Brandon Scott, let's say this, he disputes this. He says he has a witness. Okay, he said, in no way. This is someone who works for Senator Mary Washington. She said, in no way did Brandon do anything to provoke this. So here's my thing. Okay, so Brandon Scott's just walking up, and a guy just walks up to him and punches him in the face. Right? Is that what we're expecting? Is that what we're expecting people to believe? That's foolishness. That's not what happened. I mean, yes, he has a big head like Gazoo, but that doesn't mean somebody's going to walk him and just punch him. It's just, nobody believes that. He tried to push past him for whatever reason, and because he's a little entitled little Mervo guy, and that's what happened. And the guy overreacted. Brandon Scott overreacted. I gotta get past. I didn't want none of your little flyers. You know what I mean? That's just what happened. All right, so they're gonna throw this guy Michael T. Moore, under the bus, and so a spokesman for the police says that the incident is under investigation. No police report available yet. Brandon Scott also says that he waited to call the police till after the event because he did not want to disrupt it. Okay, so Jack Young, who was not at the event, he released a statement. And he said that he is making reference to a partial video that has been circulating. And they're still calling it an altercation. So this is Jack Young, the mayor. Jack Young says, in light of the recent altercation between City Council President Brandon Scott and a volunteer of another campaign, you named him, so name the campaign. Name Sheila Dixon campaign. He has instructed the police to fully investigate this alleged assault of an elected official. All right. So what bothers me about this is that because he's an elected official, that makes it so he wasn't even hurt. So they're gonna take more resources to investigate this foolishness than they are against real situations that happen. This is gonna be a whole thing, and it is ridiculous. But like I said, it's gonna be a whole thing. Brandon Scott doesn't like Jack Young. Jack Young doesn't like Brandon Scott. Brandon Scott doesn't like Sheila Dixon. Sheila Dixon doesn't like Brandon Scott, nor does she like Jack Young. But they're gonna sit and they're gonna do this whole song and dance thing because this is an election time, and it is ridiculous, and it is a waste of resources and everything. Man up, Brandon Scott. Just ridiculous. Anyway, in this time, this is Jack Young. In this time, when politics can quickly become divisive and bitter, we must always appeal to our better angels. That this type of behavior displayed on the video capturing the altercation is disgusting and will be fully investigated. They've already said it's a partial video, so we don't have what happened before this alleged punch You're just going to take this little part of the video. If you remember, I don't know if people remember, but there was a video that they had of a shooting that happened in New York once in a club. Maybe it was with a rapper or something like that. And then we had one part of the video that showed the rapper discharging the weapon, and people just like, oh my God, he shot the club. But then when they end up getting more footage to show some robbers and he had taken a gun from someone, and you know what I mean? It's just like you don't have the whole picture until you have the whole thing. You don't have the whole picture. But this guy, Michael T. Moore, he's not someone of, big notoriety, so he's not going to be believed. And Jack Young is going to bring the full weight of the police department down. This is typical. But he says, thankfully, Brandon Scott was not seriously injured, and so there have been Facebook threats back and forth. This is going to be a whole thing. So Scott and his communications director said that they spoke with Sheila Dixon Wednesday night at the event and with staffers of her campaign, who apologized and told Moore to leave. So there was a lot going on behind the scenes that we did not get a chance to see. The next day they said that they were expected to get the assurance from Dixon that Moore will no longer be working for her campaign. Maybe he can volunteer for somebody. So Jack Young's campaign. So punching a candidate running for mayor is serious. This is coming from the Scott campaign, and this needs to be dealt with. We are going to have more of these forums. That's true. Oh my goodness! They're like, oh, maybe Moore is going to be waiting for Brandon Scott. Let's finish this. The sequel, right? So also concerning Scott's team, there were threatening posts on Facebook, which are still up to date, including one that says, if I knew you wanted to fight, I would have knocked you out and not tapped your jaw. So that's interesting. I mean, I don't think he wanted to fight. He wanted to tell the police. He didn't really want to fight. But Sheila Dixon, of course, the professional here, she says that this is unacceptable, which it is, given the way that Brandon Scott has spun it. But we're just assuming that what Brandon Scott said is true. So let's say that Brandon Scott, let's look at Mr. Moore's account. So let's say that Brandon Scott just came in trying to push past him. Is that acceptable for a political candidate, someone running for mayor, for him to just push past, some what he deemed as a menial person passing out flyers for one of his opponents? Is that acceptable behavior? What if he did push past him and then he swung at him? And clearly, if he wanted to hurt him, he would have actually hit him. How you swing and it's just kind of like a warning, and so it didn't really hit him. What about that? Can we investigate that? Michael T. Moore, you should file charges against Brandon Scott for assault since he want to play this game. Like, don't let them railroad you and turn Brandon Scott into some kind of martyr. Clearly, he wasn't hurt, right? I'm just saying. So Sheila Dixon said that Moore has worked for her campaign in 2016. And she's had no dealings with him in the last years. The last thing that Sheila Dixon needs is another scandal. Staffers confirmed that photos showed him standing near Dixon at her campaign kickoff in December. Okay, so obviously it's somebody that she knows, but she said, look, if you're going to punch him, you should have covered your face. But interesting. So she says, it's not between her, whatever is between him and Brandon. I have no knowledge about that. And I believe that. She doesn't have any knowledge. So, but here's another interesting tidbit before we get out of here. They're also saying, this is coming from the Scott campaign, that Moore came to Brandon Scott last June seeking help with his motorcycle, which he said was impounded by the police, but Scott did not help him. And I don't know whether or not that had anything to do with any particular animosity. It was impounded by the police in Baltimore County, not Baltimore City, she said, and it was out of the jurisdiction of Mr. Scott. So as Moore tells it, there are other issues between the two guys, including a lawsuit over a charity he runs that names Scott and other city officials. So as we continue to probe into this, the two guys definitely know each other, but this being the next peg in this long-running feud, and all of that. So don't take me wrong, my heart is pure, and I hate bullies with power. This is what Moore is saying about Brandon Scott at his latest encounter, as this whole thing is playing out. It is interesting. They're calling any witnesses that may have seen things to come forward, so get another account here. So they're saying someone else. I mean, everyone has different accounts, so okay. As Brandon approached, this is the account. Let's get the name here. This is. What is this person's name? Okay, so they're saying as Brandon approached, this guy pushed him pretty hard, and Scott tried, supposedly to this person, Scott tried to walk around Moore and go inside the building, but the guy blocked his way and then hit him in like the face or shoulder, he said. Then he pushed him and swung, and I think hit him again. So this is even different than what Brandon Scott is saying. This is Mr. Staten. So Staten said that he grabbed Moore and pulled Scott inside. I said, "What are you thinking? You can't put your hands on him," Staten said. There were 7 or 8 people who saw it, and they were amazed. I wish I was standing right there. Y'all are so lucky I wasn't standing right there. So that is the account. But let's keep in mind that this account is coming from people who are friendly with Brandon Scott. So the truth lies somewhere in the middle of both accounts, and we'll see how that goes. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, at The Diamond K Show, at Radio on Fire. Of course, are you tired of being lied to? Are you tired of the mainstream media spinning stories? Then you must be ready for some honest, passionate dissection of the daily news. And that's what happens here on The Diamond K Show. Radio on Fire. And for continued viewing of our shows, radioonfire.com/join is where you go. I will see you guys tomorrow.